Nope. Oh, there we are. You working now?
I don't know. Let me give it a second on my side. You looking good over there?
I think it's working. I just don't really see the chat. God damn it. Oh, little program. Well, I have the. All right, let's go. I think we're live.
All
Hey,
right,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks for joining us. I think we're just going to try this. Um, see if this works. Let me switch it back here. Um, Mic is working nice. I have Dela here with me today. I think I can see the chat. So yeah, we just thought we're gonna launch this up, talk a little bit about what we've been up to. We've been working together for many years now, and we're doing some stuff, some personal stuff together. So we thought, just kind of jump in. We're both at home, as most of us are, just chilling, working, and working on the personal work when we have time. So, again, we're going to talk about some of the work that we've been up to. Just share a little bit with you guys, answer some questions. You guys can feel free to ask questions on the chat. I'm going to go through them later on. And if you guys don't know Dela, Dela, we've been working together for the past 7 years, I think, right, Dela? Yeah. So we've been at Sony for 7 years now, and we both work together on the God of War. Dela is the lead concept artist, concept character artist on the team. And he does a lot more than just the lead concept art job. So, but we can talk about that too in a second. So here, let me jump right into and share with you guys some of the work that we'll get to this in a second, but share a little bit of the work that Dela has been up to. And Dela, I don't know if you want to just talk about a little bit of your background, and I'll just flip through some of these images.
Yeah, this is some of the stuff, obviously, that you might have seen that I did on God of War, working with Raf. We had a good rapport over the last 7 years, kind of just like right off the bat, really working together, and probably like everyone watching, it's just a real affinity for character design in any form. But this is some of the work I had done on that, so you might recognize some of these. And a lot of stuff we do on the team as a concept artist is just really kind of explore like the what ifs of characters, like really looking for what the design could be. Prior to joining Santa Monica, I'd done a lot of work, but on projects that never really came out. And I've worked on a lot of stuff from realistic to stylized and everything in between. A lot of it's like new IP pitching, as well as kind of matching styles artistically that would match whatever the tone, the gameplay, or the mood of the project was. So I have a real range of work. A lot of the other stuff I like to do is kind of just creatively kind of keep a sketchbook handy and do a lot of character designs and idea generation kind of in there. And so we can kind of talk a little bit about that creative process, why I'm doing that, the benefit of it, how it relates to even kind of working in the studio as well. All my day to day stuff is all digital, as you can expect, but I still like getting back to the sketching stuff.
Yep.
And just like Raf, I just love a wide range of characters. It's one of those things that I just have a real love and affinity for, kind of any kind of shape. Uh, I like to kind of go down those trails and explore ideas and see what happens. A lot of stuff that we do on the concept side is design characters, and in that process, we do a lot of iteration. And we can do 30 designs and we'll only pick one for the final. But all of that's kind of really driving us forward to what that final is. So a lot of the work isn't seen, but we wanted to show you guys a little bit of
Right.
maybe kind of how we work on some personal stuff and how we explore designs a little bit too, and kind of what that process is like, because it's never really just like a one and done um,
Yeah.
approach.
It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, a lot of stuff is not even seen, right? And we don't get the chance to. Not even that we want to share some of that stuff, but within the walls of the studio, there's just a lot of work that happens like that, right? Like nobody
Yeah,
would ever see the exploration phase.
yeah. I think there's probably like 80% of the stuff you don't see, but it's one of those things that's always kind of stepping you closer to what that final is and getting that visual solution for whatever they need. And
Yeah.
um, that's why I think one thing too is great that we can talk about, just that collaboration that takes place. I know when I first had started, I kind of had that outsider view of just oh, I'll just go in there to do a design, knock it out of the park. But what I found is actually some of the strongest designs actually come to that collaboration and that teamwork, and especially when you're in a studio situation, that's a real big part of it. And that's kind of like how Raf and I's relationship developed is working closely together.
Dude, how is your? We're looking at some of the sketchbook stuff that you kind of always put together, but how is your creative process on that? Like, what do you usually, kind of get inspired by, or how would you go about creating your just personal work?
Usually, it's kind of just finding a subject matter or something I have some kind of love or interest for. A lot of stuff too is just kind of picking up some story. A lot of stuff can be really driven by the story, the mood that you want to feel with the character. Um, the nice thing, all these drawings are cleaned up, but if you look at my actual sketchbook pages, there's like a million notes kind of like jotted down and written in the margins, and all of that's just kind of the ideas I'm searching for.
Hmm.
And the one thing I'm doing, especially at the beginning of the creative process, is just being open to what directions we can follow. A lot of times when I get more of that kind of unexpected take or twist or go down this alleyway on a new direction, those are when some of the strongest designs come out. Um, for me, it's just really about being open to what different ingredients can we pull into a character, even if it's something that we've seen like a million times done for, like a zombie or a vampire or that kind of stuff. Like, is there that little twist that we can add to it? So the whole first part is just for me is just like a what if, and sketching is just a real quick way for me to real loosely kind of go through ideas. A lot of time when I'm just starting out, I'll just do a lot of small work so I can run through as many random ideas as possible. So let's say I can get a page of 30 designs really fast within an hour or so. I haven't really invested in one, but that kind of will set me up for what I want to do next and kind of see which one rises to the top. Um,
Right.
and just like we do at the office, the same thing. Some of the work I think we'll show a little later is just how Raf and I kind of kick ideas around, and having someone to even bounce those off of is also great. And then also just being open to like a different perspective on a design is maybe it's a way into a look that you hadn't even thought of, but it unlocks this other idea for you, and it kind of grows beyond what you even expected.
Yeah.
Um,
That's usually what it is. Yeah. It, like usually starts with just so like kind of a open, like a lot of open ideas, and just throw a lot of stuff in the table, and then it kind of evolves into something that like sometimes you find something that then just evolves into the final. But I think that initial exploration that Dela's talking about is what makes it something unique. Sometimes you just have to go really wide and then get into the final designs, sparking off of something that you didn't thought about it before, right?
yeah, and that's something that even just working together back and forth between the two of us is great too, because Raph does a lot of creative stuff too. He'll even do the sketching in ZBrush at a real early stage on things as well. The great thing is, I think, just having such an experience with character design, we can both show each other drawings and maybe like, man, there's like 80% of that that's really bad, but still being able to just look at that 15% that could be that diamond in the rough that's in that, and just seeing it's not necessarily like a pass fail, but all right, well, where could we take this? We want to make that work. And then also having someone that can talk to you and be like, hey, man, this isn't hitting, and give you a little bit of that sanity check as well. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And most of the time, like I would do something, or you would do something that it's not even what you were thinking about it when you
yeah.
were sketching, right? And it's like, oh, that's not exactly what I had in mind, but hey,
Yeah,
that,
let's go with it. No, no. The cool thing too is like with you and other artists I work with that who are like I close with is there's stuff we may not show at a polish level, but even like a scribble or a real loose design, since we're kind of so dialed in with the back and forth and the aesthetics and stuff, you can be like that. That's it. Let's go down that direction, and then we'll get it a lot more polished and clean up as we go. But just having that shorthand with each other has been really a pleasure.
so here let's talk about some of the work that we've been up to, because we've been working on um, this project together, a little more sci-fi. It's a little more different than the stuff that we do on like day to day, but we both come from a background uh, of just sci-fi projects. Is something that we both love.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought about doing something like within that style to just get some ideas out of our systems, I guess. So I don't know, Dali, you want to talk about like how at least how it started to for you, and some of the ideas I guess we had early on, and how it evolved.
Yeah, so like Raf said, this is like a project we're kind of doing together. Right now, kind of like a loose name for it. It's called Tracers. It's very early, but we're doing that back and forth. And I think the idea is just kind of creating a content that is more in that sci-fi universe. Um, Again, but also offers opportunity for characters. So we're thinking about it as maybe it's like a lot of little short stories, but has a main character or a through line or an adventure or quest that kind of drives and connects them all. But it gives us a nice range to create a real range of characters and environments and ships and all that kind of stuff that we love. The funny thing, like Raf said, is we both have sci-fi background. I think we were both originally brought on for a sci-fi project, even though the last 7 years has been fantasy nonstop. The
Right.
sci-fi stuff is something we love, and we're just trying to get back and kind of scratch that itch creatively for us.
Yep. Definitely scratch that itch creatively. And a lot of influences, even people were asking in the chat, like, yeah, influences like Star Wars and Star Trek, like a lot of Star Wars. Recently there's just been so much awesome content that's really inspired both of us creatively. And so yeah, there's definitely we'll always pull influences off of that stuff that we like.
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff we were doing with this is when we talked about the sci-fi stuff is just not making it so it's a super slick design all by itself, which can be there, but give some influences from like um, maybe other cultures or bring in a little mystery or some kind of element that asks that question for the viewer, like, oh, I wonder where they are, what's their backstory? Can we kind of seed any of that information in there? Because we have some wide ideas that we haven't fully explored, but we're trying to just kind of like pepper those in there as well. And I think the element of the sci-fi with a little bit of that fantasy or the mystery or that really fantastic element is still something we're kind of seeding throughout this, even though it is more of a sci-fi project.
Yeah, yeah. So here, let's go through some of the early stuff that we've
Yeah.
done. We don't want to show a lot of stuff. We have quite a few more than what we go to show here, but we picked just the one character just to walk you guys through some of the creative process initially that we had for this. So this is some of the sketches that Della did for some of the characters on that we were starting to build on the universe. And Della works a lot on the kind of blue pencil. I don't know if you want to touch base on that a little bit, Della.
On the sorry, the blue pencil stuff.
Yeah, yeah, just like how you go about the sketching and just the process for that.
Yeah, a lot of it just kind of starts off with us talking about ideas, throwing things back and forth, and then I'll just kind of jump in and start drawing. Um, and a lot of it is kind of to see where it goes. A lot of times I'm just kind of searching shapes, and I'll just if you look at a real raw sketchbook page of me, it's kind of like all over the place, but that's kind of intended just to kind of fire off those cylinders on the what if. But then I'll just kind of sit down and loosely sketch it out and see if the ideas are working. The nice thing when I do the blue pencil stuff is all the loose stuff really doesn't commit, but it's enough for me to see it. And I'll kind of almost ideate the drawings on top of each other when I'm working on my sketchbook. One idea, another idea, and I can let it kind of form where I initially thought it was going to go, but I'm still open to kind of see what new shapes and things kind of pop out as I'm working. So being open to those kind of creative mistakes in that input. And then, the nice thing is if it's not working, can easily erase. It's not always something I knock out of the park by any means. I just don't show the bad stuff. Um, but then I can just kind of follow an idea as it's going. And the nice thing is I work pretty big in my sketchbook, so I can just get that nice flow of everything. And if I have an idea, I can fully kind of realize how it goes.
Yep.
But a lot of it for me is just kind of searching those what ifs. And then, like I said, I'll write down a lot of kind of cues just for myself, like a real sketchbook page. The whole side will be filled with text, and it'll be stuff like bandits or Day of the Dead or any of these kind of like themes I want to kind of bring back. So as I'm drawing something that's specifically for a story, I can always kind of have those hallmarks kind of there that I can bring it back because it's still hitting these elements that we wanted to have kind of prevalent in the designs. And I'll even do that at work and just write them down and put it on a post-it note right there, because you can get designs, I think, that are really strong visually, but sometimes they don't hit any of the needs of what the story or what the ask from the design task is. So the thing is always kind of those are little hallmarks for me to make sure I'm really kind of incorporating that stuff. And
Do you
even like
usually
some of
go?
the no good.
I was just gonna ask you. Do you usually go with like a? Do you have like a one piece of reference that inspired you to sketch something, or you go more about the shape and try to find something that looks interesting for that one sketch?
I'll usually try. So I use a lot of reference, and I think that that really helps. But the very first step in ideating for me is I'll just put down 100% what's in my head. But immediately right after that is start to bring the reference in and see how that really helps define it a little bit, because the I want to really kind of sell the creative idea, but then kind of make sure it's wrapped in the real world reference and stuff. I think when I've done it both ways, but I found sometimes when I go straight reference 100%, I stick so much to the reference, it doesn't allow for the creative kind of design and elements to come through. It's always a little back and forth, so it's never just always one way. But I like just to kind of get the idea, and sometimes it's more just a feeling I'm going for. But
Yeah.
then, like I said, right away, I'll use reference and kind of bring that in and ground it and look at like costume elements and how we want to have that play. And then there are times when the reference on the flip side will totally inspire a direction that you hadn't thought of as well.
Yep. It's something that's interesting because for me, it's kind of a similar process where I create a couple of different boards, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's just a one idea. But then there's a lot of you can kind of see like start to move into the reference. We just always have to be careful not to go like
Yeah,
one to one, right?
yeah,
And
that balance, that back and forth.
yeah, this is one question. Renan was asking if you when you do concept art inside the industry, like God of War, do you do concepts with pen and pencil or just go directly in the computer? I think that's a good one to answer because there's always that kind of question that comes up.
Yeah, so I'll predominantly go digital. Uh, if we're ever at the early stages of a project, sometimes will use pencil. I think even in the art of book we did, you can kind of see some of the pencil work. Um, and there's a few other artists that I've worked with who like to sketch, and one advantage of being the lead of the team is I can kind of make sure that we have time to do that. However, the one thing I would kind of give you just a caveat with that is the sketch artists I have worked with are so quick and creative, it doesn't slow the process down. So if we come to an instance where it slows the process down, um, then that's something we address. But some of them are so fast they can actually iterate even faster than working digitally.
Hmm.
However, most of us do work digitally 100%, and when we're in full production, it's almost predominantly digital. But the whole skill set and design elements are the same regardless.
Yeah.
I'm open to let an artist work in a way that's best suited for them, where we get the most creative output. And when you go into the industry, the thing you'll find is everyone works a little differently. I have some artists that work 100% digital, even more like fully rendered at the very beginning, but their speed and pace is so quick that they can do it just as fast as another artist can sketch and iterate, just even in line work.
Hmm.
So the skill set's still there. I personally like the drawing. There's some tactile stuff that I think is really great, and there's a sensitivity that um, is unique to it. But the main thing is we just kind of have to really keep the production um, forefront with all that and make sure everything's moving forward. So there are parts where there is more time to do that, and if it is fine and it's not slowing production down, we'll allow for it. But overall, when things get moving, straight digital.
Yeah. And I guess it's the same thing for when I get the question of like the traditional sculpting versus the digital sculpting, where
Yeah,
like when you do have the time and sometimes it's more appropriate for the type of message you're trying to send. But yeah, like the principle is the same, right? Like the basics are the same. So you just
yeah.
got to know when to use it. Right? So the one that I have up on screen right now is just the one that we decided to show a little bit of the process. So I'll walk through some of the 3D as well. I don't know if you want to talk about the character itself, Della, before I do that.
Well, we were kicking around a lot of characters. I think this almost kind of started out as almost like a secondary, tertiary character, but then we kind of liked some of the stuff that was going on with the design and playing with the idea with the kind of the swords or the handheld weapons. Even the idea that even if it is sci-fi, you can still see them physically using that. The way they might load a gun instead of it being so slick, like the black powder, they like put it in, click, boom. So you can really see a physical use to the characters because I think that tactile feel in them is something we like. And then since we're going sci-fi, even doing little things like pushing elements of the helmet where it kind of has a muzzle or a different shape than even just a human head. The idea that even at that sense, you're kind of curious to what's under it. You feel it isn't human. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. And then you'll see where kind of Raf took that as well. And then just getting a mix of textures and in the design elements. So we do have the sci-fi metal stuff, but we have some of that old clothing, worn leather kind of elements as well.
Yeah. Here, so let me just kind of share with you guys a little bit of how we got to this point. So, like a lot of the early stuff that we were doing, I was just doing a bunch of ZBrush sketches on top of like sketches from Dela, and then trying some stuff out myself. And then this one, it was kind of like a similar thing where I just started to block out the shapes. And you guys can see, even on this stage, like everything is very loose. Like all the shapes are very loose, and even on this stage right here, we do a lot of back and forth on just like, I'm like, here's some of the shapes that I think are interesting. Like maybe they're slightly different than what this initial sketch was. That sketch was actually, I don't even call it like a sketch. Like there's a lot of information on that painting, so that was kind of a little more straightforward. But a lot of times where we're just bouncing ideas back and forth, there's a lot more of that kind of like interpreting some of the shapes, and maybe seeing in 3D will spark some other ideas that will take it from there.
Yeah,
So that's
Raf,
why,
on that kind of stuff too. I'm always curious to how that works as well, because I think sometimes artists will do something that works really good in 2D but doesn't necessarily translate to 3D. And you've always seemed good to like analyzing designs, but also making the changes that need to be there, and still kind of somehow still retaining the stuff. Because I know a lot of times when I did the 2D stuff, like until I started doing 3D myself, I was like, oh man, I totally did not break this down in a way that worked in any meaningful kind of way.
it's funny
So
because in the 2D, like you try to make it work for that one view, but like I think you have a
yeah.
pretty good idea of like 3D space and how things are built and stuff like that. But I guess for me, like in 3D, every time you find an angle, I always just try to make it as good as that one angle. Like I see
Mhm.
a lot of when people are starting that there's that perfect view where everything kind of flows really nice, but then when you turn it to the side view, then it kind of falls apart. So it's always just kind of that compensating. Like when you do a side view, you find the angles, and you might break the third quarter or front view, and then
Yeah.
you find a good angle. So there's that kind of that to me. That's why I think 3D is so like fascinating, because you just always like same thing for sculpting in general. Like you always from all the angles you're trying to find that nice composition, and um, so I think that helps. And it's a little hard to get it at first, but then when you get good at sketching, I guess that's why these are very loose, and it will inform most of the shapes, because in 3D it's very hard to tweak stuff um, when you get to a stage where things are polished. So practicing this sketching is pretty important. I mean, you can see here that this one is the same thing, but just showing like I did a little bit more work on the face, trying to capture that initial intent on the sketch that Della was doing, and then a lot more just on the sketching. Like this is all Dynamesh, and if you guys are probably used to this at this point, but you can see the lines are very rough, and I'm literally just trying to get that, just breaking it up. Hey, what's up, Justin? Justin's on the chat saying hi.
What's up, Justin?
Yeah, so like keeping it loose, um, doing the same thing for the body. Again, I think what Della was doing was, there's just a lot of information there that I can pull from, and we just started to resolve a few things here and there. And at this point, even at the beginning, again, we're both looking at a lot of reference for materials and how things are built, what kind of things they had, you know, uh, available for them to build clothes like this, like who are building. Maybe this character is building the clothes for her, but maybe someone else is building it. Like, I'm just always thinking about that and how the universe will expand in the future for those type of things. So here's just a little bit more advanced. One thing that I like to do quite often is just drop the model into like a rendering software, just to try to see if the volumes are working. Usually, you will get, especially with metal, you'll get a different vibe from seeing in ZBrush versus seeing on something else. This was rendered in Arnold in Max, and I'm just importing the meshes with Polypaint just to get a feeling for it. Let's see here.
Raf, when you were even doing some of the stuff, I know there was like some like inspiration from the alien head and stuff, but even just when it's like, for me, I'm not even considering if the eyes line up at that point. Because even like the
Mhm.
mask guys are a little further apart and everything. Did you have to kind of adjust that? 'Cause like I
It
like what
actually
you're doing with
it
the alien,
worked.
which I hadn't even thought of initially.
It actually worked. You did a good job. Like, of course, I was just always trying to separate the visor and turning off the lens just to see if the eyes
Yeah.
were placed correctly and that kind of stuff. But it worked pretty well. And then from this point on, and usually it's a good point to just bring it up because even on a project, in a bigger project, this one we don't have a lot of I guess reviews just between the two of us. But
Hmm.
in a bigger project, we would often get the sketch approved before we start polishing it up like this. Here's just a lot more just of the technical work of like separating pieces, polishing it up. And then after, of course you can change things at this point, but then when you start getting to this point, it becomes a lot more work to like take a step back to then, repolish it up again. So we're always trying to, do check-ins, see if things are feeling correctly and all that stuff. And same thing at work at a big production where you just have stopping points for check-ins.
Hmm.
Yeah. Let's see here. And these are pretty quick too. Like people are asking about just kind of just time wise. Like these are quick, few days of work, and you can start to see here now it's just a lot more just polishing it up, getting things to a state where it feels polished. And this is all done in ZBrush. We're just extracting pieces, and the more you extract and polish and Z remesh and extract, the more details you add to it. Kind of the more finished it starts looking. And then again, here just trying to capture a lot of the stuff that Dela was doing. I was also looking at a lot of just Star Wars costume fabrication and
Hmm.
how they fabricate the I guess the costumes for the movies and things like that.
No, that's even something I think we talk about too. Is just how we want to do the costuming, and again, kind of making it believable a little bit by adding a little bit of that real world influence. And it doesn't have to be the same shapes or anything, but just a little of that construction kind of grounds it.
Yeah.
So stuff along those lines that I look at is like since it's sci-fi, like early spacesuits or early uniforms from like World War I and World War II, before designs have become so streamlined. You lose a little bit of the human touch that made them. I like looking at some of those early kind of influences before they totally figured things out, and you can kind of see um, where all that lies. And then Raf even does a great interpretation. Like sometimes I'll put a lot of gesture in my piece just to get things flowing and everything there, and it doesn't always totally translate to how the character will be built or when they kind of think about how they move. But Raf just always does an awesome job at that.
The
Personally,
one,
when we're doing the projects and in studio.
thanks, Dave. Too nice. But also like coming up with some rules, right? Like no zippers. Like what was the like some
Yeah.
of that stuff, just to always keep it in line with just kind of the materials and how they're building these things. The one thing that I learned too, like just doing a lot more of these quick design works, is just kind of just committing to the shape. I don't know if you just have a lot of that too, but especially in 3D, uh, it's so easy to just noodle stuff and like massage. Like I could spend days into like that forearm piece, this forearm piece here, and just polish it up, forever. You can always go back to it and add more details or change the design, but just like committing to a shape and just getting
Hmm.
to the end line is what helped me move faster through some of the designs.
Yeah.
So sometimes, instead of just noodling, I'll just find something that graphically works on this, its basic form. Because then, there's always that concern of just adding so much into it that it just
Yeah.
becomes like the whole character is a forearm piece, like that
No, I mean
glove.
that's exactly the same on the concept side. I mean, sometimes you're working at a piece, you're looking like this close because you can zoom in and getting all that really fine detail, and you zoom out and it doesn't actually hold up together.
Yeah.
So like just like you, I'm a huge fan of just the shape design, and even like for this project, we're not showing a lot of stuff, but we'll even do a little shape silhouette breakdown for each of the different groups in this story. And it's like maybe we have more of these kind of round designs for this character and in the group and family he's in. Maybe it's more like elongated, like straight edges, and even the material stuff we set for that. So we kind of try and break those elements out that even at a glance you can kind of tell where they're at. And then once you go in and get that to detail, I think then you can just have fun with it once you have that, and as long as the shapes are reading really clear at the beginning.
Yeah, just having that just awareness too when you start putting details. Like here, you see the more detailed pass on the character. Like having that awareness that when you're putting detail, that's not gonna conflict with the original intent of the
Yeah.
shapes, right? Like keeping it still like graphically strong from a far distance. And
And
um,
that's one thing we even talk about with any characters we're working on together is just the legibility of that stuff. Sometimes it can get so noisy. You just have that love for all the little kind of trinkets and doodads on them. It almost becomes like a confusing mess, and you really can't tell where to look at the character. One thing I keep in mind when designing characters and just working with Raf is I try and kind of set a hierarchy, like a one, two, three. What's the primary point of interest, secondary, tertiary, and then stuff past that. The thing is, if you start making everything the number one point of interest, nothing stands out, and your eyes getting pulled all across the character. And I'd kind of mentioned this in another time we were talking, but I think you can actually compose a character the way you compose an environment and have the eye to kind of move through that. But always having that hierarchy in that design, I think, is good. So you kind of get the one, two, and three rate on them that you want.
yep. And the same thing goes for sculpting. Like we always talk about primary shapes, secondary shape, tertiary shapes. So like, it's kind of a similar process where we're always just looking at that. If things are reading from that first glance, and then when you go in, like then you start just breaking up the forms, so you can kind of see some of that being applied here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tertiary is just alpha work or texture work, just the materials.
And then even
Yeah,
some of
keep
oh, good.
go for good. No,
I
no,
was
you
gonna
go.
say, we'll even kind of play with themes in a character. Like you can kind of see, we had like the big circular eyes, even the muzzle, the respirator part comes down into more of the curve. You see the curves on the shoulder, the curves on the lights above the head. Those elements we don't want to drive super hard home, but those are little themes that visually we can cue around. And you can almost imagine if we start to design like his weapons or his ships or the planet, like maybe those elements, you start to see them kind of peppered throughout those things. So you
Yeah,
have that theme through whatever that group of character is.
exactly. Yep, perfect. Uh, Gala is asking just how you guys deal with the color palette. Um, I don't know if you want to touch on that. For me, it's kind of the basic kind of warms versus the cool colors. When you start kind of find that like whatever that the palette is for the character, or like the base that you see, the base of this is all like kind of more warm colors, and then you just balance it out with the cool colors on like kind of the metals and in the eyes. It's just kind of staying in the in lane of what it started. You know.
No, yeah, I agree. And the same thing, just the design stuff is still getting that hierarchy of the core color, secondary and tertiary. And it depends, again, I always would kind of go back to the story or the intent of the design. If this is someone that's more of a sneaky character, is doing more stealth stuff, maybe we want to play down that palette so it's not super bright, but we can still have those little secondary hits in there so it still stays alive as a design. Or maybe if it's a bolder character or like a ceremonial priest or monk or something, then the color starts to come alive. And maybe if it's from the planet or something like that, you kind of complement that as well because it's a great tool. Color is a great tool to kind of just also do the storytelling. And again, sometimes at an early phase, we'll do things where we just block out simple shapes with color palettes on them and
Yep.
play them against each other and also make sure that a lot of them aren't overlapping. Want to kind of get that distinction between groups and things.
Yep. So yeah, shape design and then color goes together. Like we do, like even for these characters, I don't have it here right now, but we have like a maybe I could pull it up. But we have like a lineup. First pass, just the graphically shape, like what Dela was saying. Like maybe it is more round, and how do they go together as a group? And color, always goes on top of that, just to kind of, at a glance, see if everything's working and working together. I guess. So like what I have on screen right now, guys, is just that it's more of the render version of what we just looked at. And I've been doing a lot of my renders with kind of basic shaders. Some things have UVs and textures, like some things that I want to have a little more control. But most of the stuff is applied with just basic metals and leathers and all PBR type of shaders that work really nice with the polypaint version in ZBrush. So it is definitely just more of a quicker way to get the materials or get the model in the software for final rendering, and a lot more of that kind of concept art type of I guess concept sculpt type of work.
Mm-hmm.
They can get a lot more quicker results out of that pipeline.
I saw
And
a couple
then,
questions talking just about alien anatomy.
oh yeah,
Um,
go for it.
yeah, I think some of that stuff. It was kind of like, what do you like better, or how do you go about doing that? A lot of things that I do is just, again, a lot of kind of just like reference and researching. A lot of my early days was drawing a ton of animals and stuff. So we want something probably that looks and feels a little different than what's known. I think that kind of change on it gives it a little extra interest. And then you can pull in some of those references and stuff, But one thing I always try and do is, again, get that believability, because I think sometimes when I see alien designs that maybe aren't as successful, it looks like a shape was just kind of masked out and extruded, and you don't see even the way the tendons or the muscle armature would even work kind of underneath that. So you can kind of bring that stuff into it. And if it's something that's maybe more soft body like this, you could look at like squids or octopus or sea life, because you've got stuff that is so drastically different than human anatomy, but still has that believability and stuff in there. So I think you can really push the shapes any way you want, and then just kind of knowing the way anatomy works is just add that level or layer into it, but still get the fantastic designs. I think sometimes I see designs where I can tell that hasn't been thought out, and I'll just ask the artist or sometimes the student, "Oh, what were you thinking? This doesn't totally make sense," and it'll just kind of be like, "Oh, well, they're alien. They don't need any inner bones or ligaments or muscle." It is an easy thing to kind of hide behind, but if you add that little extra level of detail, I think you get the buy off right away, and you can see that in any of the any of the alien design that you see from movies and films and stuff too. They all have that believability into it, and I think that's what kind of helps make a successful design.
Yeah, it starts with that base core strong anatomy sense, and then you push and pull some designs or add some extra
Hmm.
design element to then like take it to, yeah, like that. Uh, I'm gonna say weird, but like more interesting shape, but that
Yeah,
doesn't break the believability of like just the anatomically correct. Like if you look at even Alien, right? Like the Alien from the Alien movies,
yeah,
the xenomorph, that like there's a lot of just like that thing is just crazy looking, but there's just a lot of anatomy in there, and then to make it function, believable. And even when you look at the head, I mean, there's just so out there,
yeah,
like guide stuff, but there's just a lot of just you always pull back something that's relatable. So like the mouth shape, or that one is like one to one to like a skull on top, in the front of the
right.
face. But if you start looking at all the alien from movies and stuff, there's always something that is relatable, or you just always have to kind of, maybe it's not completely humanoid, but there's always like an animal or uh, a fish or just something that it will go back to your mental library and bring you back into the make it believable.
Hmm. Yeah, I think all the best designs you see that stuff. Like I remember the like the creatures they did in Arrival. It's like wildly out there the way they did that, but everything's in there and it just is believable, and you don't have that disconnect of like, wait, what? You just like,
Yeah,
dude, that's crazy, but it's real. And even
if
like
you look at
Predator, when the jaw opens up, you still got the stretch of the jawbone and the tissue, but then it
mhm.
folds up, and there's no disconnect at all between it. It's like, yep,
The
that's
Arrival
real.
one is
That's
almost
real.
like that octopus, right? It's like that octopus thing.
Yeah,
But even when you see how they made like the joints, and there's always something that feels like it belongs.
yeah. I'll even look at, like I said, like a lot of stuff from the sea is great because it's so drastically different. But then I'll even just look at I don't know if this is a real thing, but like plant anatomy, but how different plants are formed and how flowers kind of open up and they'll still kind of have the veins and elements too. Like that's another option to pull from. So a good thing
Yeah,
I think for any artist, whether doing concept or 3D, is what'll help is just your level of observation of things in the world. I think sometimes a lot of students are looking only at industry work. So it's kind of more of a copy of a design. The great thing you can bring as a concept artist or even a modeler is your observation from real world stuff that's out there, and it's your take that's unique to what you've seen. Can you take something that's kind of mundane but add that special element that you see in it? And I think that's a value of any concept artist, is your perspective that's unique to you that no one else has, and you can pull from your lifetime, your personal history, even your culture. Like there's different elements in your culture depending on where you came from in the world that are maybe really familiar to you but really different and new to other people viewing that stuff. So I think that that level of
Yeah.
observation and uniqueness is something that carries through regardless. Um,
Yeah. I'm
what kind
always
of
so jealous of like just Chinese artists in general when they have that kind of they grew up with all that stuff that I think for me is just so appealing, like or
yeah,
Japanese as well, but just that Asian influence. And like I look at the work and like it's so appealing for me, but like it just comes natural for just a lot of artists that grew up with that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So
well,
like you said, it's just refreshing for some people that didn't
yeah.
grow up with that.
Well, I love just seeing that combination of like new and old. That's always one of those things that I like, and you can kind of see it in
Hmm.
this project we're doing. Is like new and old as well. Here in
Yeah,
California, uh, a lot of new stuff. Like even if you go back to the East Coast, you'll have all the new buildings, but it's smashed right up against you know statues of the founding fathers or like more brick layouts in the cities in Boston and stuff like that. And you go to Europe, you see even older architecture with new stuff right next to it. And um, you know,
yeah,
even if you go far east, there's like temples as well as new stuff, and just that contrast of those elements and some of that shape language, like Raf said, is just so ingrained in every inch of the culture. For me, seeing that stuff, it just kind of gets me excited for designs and new options of seeing something that I haven't seen before.
that's true, dude. 100%. So there was one question here that was interesting that I guess when it comes to functionality of the concept and stuff, will you guys go with functionality or just or a cool design? And that one it speaks up so much of just not just this that we're working on, of course, but just work in general. Like when we're making something, there's needs to we need to of course it depends on the style, but like even on fantasy like God of War, there's always needs to have some sort of functionality that is the primary driver for a lot of the design. So I would say it's a good mix between both, but
Mm-hmm.
the functionality is always on the on the more defining elements. But of course, like sometimes you just give them some like some bombs on the
Yeah, I think
can.
the main things that we kind of consider when it's just working professionally, especially in games, functionality. The functionality is a literal element. We really need to support the gameplay mechanic. You know, if it isn't fun to play, no one's going to buy it and it won't get there. So we literally have to do the functionality of what that gameplay is. Um, and then another big thing that we do, and it's great in games, is games are really evolving into its own medium now. It's really like the youngest out of like film or theater or television. You know, games is the newest kid on the block, but storytelling is huge. So a lot of stuff, even if it's in studio, if there's not a story or some kind of element behind it, they're really not that interested in if it just looks cool. Now, for me, it's like Ralph said, it's not just one or the other. You know, you can still develop 100% functionality in something that still visually gets that drama and pushes the bar that you want. Um, the only thing I've seen where some artists have struggled is they'll lean so hard on something just looking cool and disregard the other stuff, and then it falls apart. And the argument can kind of be, well, doesn't it look cool? Um, it does, but there's a million ways you can make something look cool and still hit the other needs as well. So it's just one of all you got to kind of consider all of those things. All of us love things that are cool. Um, but if we had done something like if you're doing something for Star Wars and it looks maybe more like it comes out of Tron or something like that, you can literally say Tron looks cool, Star Wars looks cool, but if you put them together, all of a sudden there's something that's not visually kind of getting the continuity that it needs. So then you can kind of just balance it out for there. So one thing that to kind of mitigate that, things that Raf and I would do is basically set up a style guide and say, here are the principles and the things that we're looking for and what support it. We'll even include in that style guide visually what the project isn't, so we can kind of minimize that as well.
Yeah. Always they just have something that you can go back to and see if you're going off because it's just so easy. Like even to the questions like, do you go with just like stuff that looks cool? And usually that's like, sometimes you hit on the you have lucky and it ends up looking correct, but most of the time you're just gonna throw like a curveball into it and you're gonna lose the track of like less is more sometimes, and you just have
Mm-hmm.
to always have those guidelines to just put push it back into place.
Yeah.
This one, like, I mean, it's pretty fun. Just getting that this is work in progress still, but we're working towards getting all the stuff in place. Um, and we're just excited to show. I was almost just pulling up another one just to share another one with you
I
guys,
know I
but
didn't know how much you wanted to show today, man. I was like, we got
yeah, just kind of. But we'll share more in the near
yeah.
future. We're just working towards that. Um, Make sure guys ask questions. So we're almost getting to the end of this stream, and I think we touched base on a lot of cool stuff. I was curious to just see. I guess just peek on Dela's process a little bit more because even though we worked together for all these years, like a lot of the things goes without saying. It's just you just kind of have that. You think you know how a person works, but then just kind of I guess digging deep a little bit more on um, how your brain actually works. It helps. Like I actually learned a lot of stuff today. It's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see here. Um, yeah, I guess Alexander just asked if we're gonna talk more about. We're gonna continue to update us on the project. Yeah, so we'll do more of this. We have a lot of other characters in the works that's what I'm saying. Like I wanted to share today. It didn't happen. So those one question up there that someone asked if you ever made a personal project that got into a professional project later on. I don't know if you've ever done like a. Did you do like some personal trolls that we ended up using as inspiration or something like that?
We might have. There's nothing that actually really stands out, but there's a few things that I'd love to kind of keep exploring further. I got the project working on with Raf. I had done some personal work for Wizard of Oz uh, sketches, and a company that was designing the movie actually called me up and said we'd like to use it. But then it turned into me supporting them financially talk, and I didn't know where it was totally going. So that didn't happen, but I did get called for a studio for some of the Wizard of Oz stuff, and then I also kind of have a Day of the Dead project I've been kind of kicking around for a while too. I think visually it's fun, but if you ask me how you shoot that in live action, or I'm not sure how that would actually hold up.
Yeah. Usually those like where people just reach out and be like, because I had a couple like that too, or just it's a personal work, or maybe someone wants to use it for like a cover or something, or
Yeah,
sparks into like, oh yeah, I want you to work on a similar thing. So definitely not like one to one, but every time you put up a personal project, like it will most likely, people will have interest on having you do something similar for their own project or hire you. I mean, we're all hired based on our portfolio, so
I think
it's
one of the advantages of doing like a personal project is if anyone does want to reach out to anybody about doing something further, they can kind of get a feel for how it's been received by the public. A lot of times it's a little more thought out than just an idea, so people can start to get their heads around it a little easier once they actually kind of see that stuff instead of just a high level pitch of what it is. So I think all those things kind of add to it. And like Raf said, we were kind of thinking about doing this for Lightbox, and we kind of have a few ideas potentially where it could go, just leaving those little hooks in there for that. But we can talk about that later down the
oh
road.
yeah, yeah. Hopefully we'll get it ready soon.
Yeah.
Let's see here some other questions real quick.
Yeah.
Did you do the texturing substance painter? Kevin asked. No, this was done in ZBrush. All the texture was done in ZBrush for this one. But I do use Substance for professional projects where you needed to have a little bit more control because this one was more of a concept piece, and I think there's another question on that too. But I'm just trying to get quick colors and material, so I'll use a lot of textures, import texture in ZBrush, drag and drop into the model, use masking. So it's a very similar process to the Substance, but this you don't have a lot of control over. ZBrush is adding more controls to be honest now, but you don't have as nearly as many controls as you have in Substance. So this one's some uh, quicker process for that.
I see a question about self doubt as an artist.
What was that one?
Do you ever have any self doubt or just kind of that?
Oh yeah, as artists, do you guys have any self doubt?
I think yes. Uh, like I said, the work we do and we show is probably the best of what we do. I know for myself, I got a whole bunch of pages sketchbook I'll never show the world, even though I have showed a few of them. But there's a lot of times too when a concept comes up for me and I'm not sure what it is. Um, the only thing is it doesn't come across as fear, but it's like, okay, I'm not sure where this goes. And I think what can happen, especially if you're first starting out, and I had actually done this when I was starting out, is just think of all the reasons I can't design it or the difficulty of what the ask is. And I can almost like talk myself out of doing a design. What I do now is I just start the ball rolling and just start doing it. And the way I work now is just knowing through experience, like it'll come and evolve. And sometimes what I'll do is just start with something dumb and generic on whatever that is expected. And as soon as I start to get it, next thing I know, I've been working on it for 3 days, haven't even looked up, and if we get something that we like. So the only thing I would say is, even though doubt does come as an artist, just don't be in a spot where it kind of paralyzes you creatively. It's okay if you don't know, but just start putting pencil to paper, working digitally, however you want to do that to kind of get things moving. And it just kind of will naturally start to grow.
Yeah. And I have a lot of self doubts myself too. Just you don't usually let them show, but I think the way I approach it is just I try to kill them by doing the work. So a lot of the work that you see me doing is just practicing or trying to prove out something that maybe I'm doubting myself, and I'm just want to see if I could put it out there and at least become a more confident by doing the work. But you self doubt yourself a lot, especially we work on a very competitive industry, not so much like competitive between us, but just it's very hard to um, always come up with the best designs. Or so as an industry, like what's asked from the artist is just very competitive. So you always kind of self doubt yourself, and you always try to get better. But again, sometimes it's just the confidence that you have to practice is what's going to help you, because not no nobody's perfect. You're always going to have failed designs and good designs. So you just have to practice letting it go and be more confident with the work that you're
Yeah,
putting
no,
in.
even to the self doubt thing. So I don't know if like you're in the industry or a student, but as a student, one thing I noticed is you get exposed to art and you get exposed to a lot of professional stuff. So your eye develops very fast. You can see what's good and what's not. And as a student, it develops even quicker than your hand. So you can be like, oh, I'm not getting this level I need, and you can almost be discouraged by all that work. Like I'm not at this level because your eye can recognize it. Another reason I kind of keep sketchbooks is I can just look back and be like, you know what, over the 6 months, even though I'm not where I'm at, I did grow and make the progression.
Mhm.
So it's like um, you can see yourself growing and moving forward, and that's the biggest part. Like as long as that's happening, you'll be able to get to where you go. I think I even had some old sketches of where I was at before, and they were pretty pretty bad sketches. But that dedication and ability to grow helped me, and having the sketchbooks as a record to look back and see, um, I could see the growth because there's always like you may not be at the top bar, but you're getting there, And I think you just need to put that investment in.
Yeah. Dela, Gustavo's asking you why you use blue pencils.
Why do I use the blue pencils?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to buy him new pencils because he always got them.
Yeah, I just use the simple blue pencils. I went to school at San Jose State, and I started in the animation program. And back when I was there, they still had where we were doing pencil tests and stuff, and we'd use the blue pencils. So that's kind of why I started using these. The reason I continued using them is the drag on paper is a little different than graphite. And the nice thing is when I'm searching those ideas, like really kind of drawing over and finding the shapes. Um,
Mhm.
Blue pencil is very forgiving that you'll never see all the stuff I do. I can just erase out and get the final line there. But as far as that exploration, it's there for me. The downside is trying to do a demo with a non-photo blue pencil because guess what doesn't show up on screen during the demo? The sketch I'm doing.
There you go. That answers. Here, let's finish up with this one. Do you ever lose passion? Like, how do you manage kind of losing passion? I guess it's more talking about kind of the burnouts. I guess how do you motivate yourself when you don't like the project you're working on or something like that? You want to start that one?
Yeah, that that does happen. I was doing new IP development at very early in my career, and what we were doing was basically new world, new characters every 3 months, and along with the new IP, we'd switch the style. So it was like a new style, a completely new world, cast of characters, and all that stuff. And we were going so fast, and I was so into it. And like along with creating, I'm learning how to developed a different stylization because that wasn't easy either. Um, and after that, I got pretty burnt out just creatively and the passion kind of stuff. And that was the first time I got burnt out for more than like a day or a couple of days, which can kind of happen, but you can ramp back up. So it took me probably like a month to kind of get it back. I was still able to do the work and everything, but that drive kind of dipped. So what I do now is I'm just aware that that will happen. And I just got to keep an eye on it these days to make sure that if I start to feel where it was getting to in that process, I'm able to mitigate it a lot earlier. So I don't let it get to that full overblown thing. Some things is just kind of seeing where you like to get inspiration from, like movies and storytelling and books and stuff for me is something I do. So I'll go in and get back into that stuff a little more, or look at something that's different than whatever I'm working on. Just because you're so immersed in what that is, it can take up your whole view as an artist. But then just getting out and stepping back a little bit and seeing other stuff, and it kind of gets you inspired as well again. Like books are great for me because there's no visuals associated with that. It's a world, and your mind just starts firing off on what that looks like. Just hanging out with friends, and otherwise just kind of keeping a sense of humor about stuff too, and kind of keeping the big picture in mind.
Yeah. And also, like, never, especially on, I don't know if your question was more for personal projects or professional, but especially for personal projects, just don't be so precious about those things, right? Like you always, there must be something that you love, you're loving it right now. Maybe, when you started with like a while back and you're just not feeling it anymore, just go start something else. Like I have so many projects that I started that are just in drawers that I often like go in and like start searching, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember, like this is fun, let's bring it back up. So if you're feeling burned out on your personal side, then put it to the side, start something else that you feel that you're gonna get you excited, and then maybe you revisit that later. So just don't let it get to you in a way that's gonna block you, right? Like you just not gonna be able to do anything. So like always, I think my recommendation is just always starting something, even if it's like something simple that you're gonna get some pleasure out of it, because then it's gonna get you back inspired again. If you just put it like if you just work, push through it, and then that get burned out and take a long break, then like it becomes hard to get back. So I think I always just find something that maybe you just have to take a break and go try sculpting, or go sketch, and go get frustrated with something else, and then you come back. Like burnouts usually happens if you're just trying to push really hard on something. But if it's on a professional level, then it's a little more complicated because we have to pay bills, and some people might not be able to drop work or go do something else. But I think it goes back to then the personal stuff as well. Like maybe try to find the time for you to put a pause on the personal stuff and or the professional work and go into the personal stuff, so you can get some pleasure out of that, and just find that balance. And try not to get burned out. Like if you're trying to find that balance, I think it's gonna work out a lot better. Like when you just go heads down on everything, with everything that you have on just one thing, then you probably burn yourself out fairly quick.
Yeah, I think if you just get that, like I admire strong work ethic. I think that's a great advantage to anyone. But there is an extreme side of that Ralph's talking about, and if you're that much into it, you can almost start resenting that project you're working on. So like I think like Ralph said, pull back, try some other things, give yourself a little kind of space on that.
Yeah. I think that's it, guys. So we're reaching that 1 hour that we said that we're gonna do. Do you have anything you want to say or plug or anything, Dela? You good?
No, just this was great. Kind of just sharing a little bit of kind of like our back and forth that we do. And if anyone wants to follow me and see some more sketches and stuff, just hit me up on D Longfish on Instagram or Dela Longfish on ArtStation.
Yeah, I'll leave all that stuff on the video as well for people. And I know we didn't get to all the questions, but we'll do this again fairly soon, and you guys can hop it back up, and we'll go from there. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much. I'm gonna shut it down now.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Raf, man. It was great, dude. Nice break from quarantine.
Yeah, we'll do this again soon. All right. See you guys. Thank you.